Now, the Liberals say they'll double the goods and services tax credit for 6 months and bump up the Canada Housing Benefit by $500 just once for low-income renters. And they'll provide dental care funding for kids under 12 who don't have access to insurance, part of an agreement they made with the NDP to secure their support through 2025. Ranty Boissonnault is Minister of Tourism and Associate Finance Minister. He's with us now. Minister Boissonnault, good to have you on the program. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks, Vashi. It's great to be here.
The NDP have been calling for your government to help out Canadians with measures like the ones you announced today. Inflation has been increasing since last year. Why are you only making this announcement now, Minister?
Well, I think if we take a step back, Vashi, to see how we got here, in the Budget 22, we put in a whole series of measures, about $8.9 billion, to put money in the pockets of Canadians. We increased the Canada Child Benefit. We gave seniors a 10% increase on OAS. We made sure that the Canada Worker Benefit would give families about $2,400 more. Today is a continuation. Today is more supports, adding on what we've already done. We've crisscrossed the country. We heard from Canadians. We know that most vulnerable Canadians are feeling the pinch of inflation that is rising throughout the world. And so today is really important, targeted supports for Canadians who need it the most at the time they need it the most. It's dental, it's the housing benefit, and it's also the GST rebate doubling, which combined will put hundreds of dollars in the pockets of Canadians who need it the most. And it's coming at a really important time. We're going to be heading into the fall. We're going to be heading into, an unpredictable season with COVID. We hope that everything is going to be fine. But when it comes to inflation, we're also making sure that what we've done today will not stoke the flames of inflation at all.
Okay, Minister, I just want to respectfully challenge, though, that this is the time people need it most. I was looking back at inflation. It started to rise about a year ago. It's been over 4.5% since October of last year. The NDP introduced a motion to do exactly what your government is doing now all the way back in May, and your government did not vote in favor of it. What makes this time so much worse than all those other times for Canadians? Because I can tell you, we've been hearing from them all year, and they've been feeling the hurt of the cost of living crisis that whole time.
So Budget 22 came out in the spring, and in that budget we put in a whole suite of measures that have, quite frankly, put hundreds of dollars in the pockets of Canadians. If you take a look at the child benefit alone in our own my own province of Alberta, Vashi, it's like $6,000 a year that those families are saving. Canada Child Benefit, not only is it indexed to inflation, it has also now had a boost through the measures that we put in place in Budget 22. And the reason that we are doing what we're doing today is because we've heard from Canadians. It's targeted. The dental benefit alone is $1,300 for families over the next 2 years. The GST rebate is hundreds of dollars to Canadians. And the housing benefit is going to help people with their housing, but also to be able to pay their other bills. So it's a targeted benefit that makes sure that we stay in that, that fiscal frame so that we're not putting any pressure upwards on inflation. We've seen a good data point in inflation coming down, but we're going to need to keep following the numbers. And the world is in this inflationary cycle. And our job as government is to make sure that we deliver for Canadians and that we focus on supports like we've done today that are targeted to those Canadians who need it the most when they need it the most.
Again, with respect, though, we were speaking a month ago, and you were once again, and your government once again was saying, well, this is indexed to inflation. It was indexed to inflation last year, not the inflation people are dealing with right now. A month ago, I was asking you the same questions. Why not introduce the things you're introducing now? Again, I'm confused about why you would wait so long. And I think your critics would ask, is this just a response to political pressure?
We're not focused on politics, Vashi. We're focused on what Canadians need us to do, and what they need us to do is to make sure that those Canadians who are hurting the most, and that's why the GST rebate is so important, because it's focused on those Canadians with, an income that is about $35,000 and less. And if we take a look at the programs that we do have that are indexed quarterly, it's the OAS, the GIS, those are indexed quarterly. Those are going to stay, and make sure that seniors are not feeling the pinch. And I think what we have to do is we have to take a look at everything that we've put in the window. When we talk about child care, when we talk about the Canada Child Benefit, we talk about the top up to OAS, we talk about the Canada Worker Benefit, which is $2,400 to a family. And then today's measures, today's supports are several $100s per month or in total for the families that need it the most. And that's exactly what we need to do. And Vashti, to make sure that we get it to Canadians soon, we're going to need the support of parties in the House to make sure that the dental, the GST rebate, and the housing benefit get to Canadians as soon as possible.
And I do have your colleagues from the other side of the House on in just a few minutes, and I'll ask them if they'll be supporting that. But I just want to make it crystal clear for our viewers. In May, your government did not feel that people who were receiving the GST rebate should get a top-up. You voted against the motion from the NDP to do exactly that. Why did you not think they need it then, and they do need it now? What changed? Because inflation has been terrible every month since then.
I think the answer to your question is we were taking very good care to make sure that the measures that were in the budget were going to land properly. We needed to get them passed so that they could get out to Canadians, and we were very much watching the frame and making sure that any investments that we would make, supports that we would make in the lives of Canadians, would not put on inflationary pressure. And so seeing that inflation did come down in July also helps us to make the decision. And these are very targeted measures. We're talking about $3.2 billion in new money, which will not increase inflation whatsoever. And that's the really kind of careful balance we have to have. Canadians want us to have a fiscal frame that makes sense, but they also want us to provide supports for those Canadians who need it the most. And Vashti, if you take a look at some of the other economic fundamentals, we have the lowest deficit in the G7 right now and the fastest growing economy. So what we're doing as a government is we're making sure that we're making investments in the supply side of the economy. So that means childcare and infrastructure and housing, so that as the economy grows, it can absorb that growth in the economy without driving inflation. So we're a government that's showing Canadians that we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
And I do take your point on those macro indicators, but I think, for example, of people who are struggling to afford their rent right now in downtown Vancouver, downtown Toronto, even downtown Ottawa right now, and their rent's well over $2,000 a month. What you announced today amounts to about $42 a month for them. Is it enough? Does it go far enough? And are you prepared if it isn't, and you hear clearly from Canadians that it isn't, to go further?
So it's a $500 top up for the year. And again, we've got to look at the whole suite of measures. So the families, the families you're talking about, if they have kids in daycare, they're saving thousands of dollars a year. The other benefits that we put in place, if there's a Canada Worker benefit that they're benefiting from, $2,400 more. So the full suite of measures is there to make sure that Canadians, we're going to have Canadians' backs. We're going to continue to have Canadians' backs, and we're going to make sure that we're not increasing inflation while we're supporting Canadians with these targeted measures today.
Okay, Minister Boissonnault, I'll leave it there. I appreciate your time this evening.
Thanks, Vashti. All the best.
Randy Boissonnault is the Associate Minister of Finance and Minister of Tourism. Let's get the opposition's take on all of this. In the studio with me, newly named Conservative Party Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman, and over in Winnipeg, NDP finance critic Daniel Blakey. Mr. Blakey, give me a moment if you don't mind, because I'm just going to ask a couple non-related to inflation questions, if you don't mind, off the bat. Ms. Lantsman, and congratulations on your new position. First of all, on the defection of Alain Reyes. In his statement, he said that his values and convictions are not compatible with the new leadership. How big of a problem is that if people in your party think that there's such a sort of distance between the leader's values and their own that they have to leave? And he's especially worried about the view of, for example, democratic institutions or maintaining law and order.
Well, it's not people in our party. It is one person who has decided to move on, and frankly, he dug in, lost a leadership race, and that's what he's decided to do. It's unfortunate for his constituents that he's chosen to sit as an independent and not voice their concerns about the biggest problem of our generation, which is the inflationary pressure that the government is continuing to put on Canadians. And he'll sit as an independent with no voice. So I'm not sure that that's the best solution for him, but to each their own.
And I understand, I take your point that it's one person, but he, I think as JP said, it's not somebody who Quebecers will be unfamiliar with. He is a familiar face in Quebec politics and certainly representing your party in Quebec. And his specific comments around not feeling like his values align. Is there any effort, or was there any effort to ensure on the leader's part or on your part that that isn't the case, to keep him in the fold? Or was it kind of like, well, you supported Mr. Charest, so you're gone?
No, look, on Saturday night we have lots of friends that work on other sides of the aisle or of the family fight in this case, and family fights are hard. And after they are done, everybody comes together. That's what happened in the Conservative caucus. All the other Quebec MPs certainly joined the fold. Two are on the leadership, one as a lieutenant and one as a deputy House leader, and I think we'll move forward. I share a lot of the same politics with Mr. Reyes, and I feel like this party reflects those views.
Okay, let me move on to the subject at hand, which is what the government has announced today. Will your party be supporting those measures? Well,
first of all, I think you saw Finance Minister 6 days ago come out of a fancy hotel in Vancouver to say that they need to not spend or restrain their spending. And then today, on the other side of the country, in front of an even fancier hotel, you have a government that is continuing the inflationary deficits. They haven't committed to reducing taxes, and if they do, if the Prime Minister takes the challenge from the new leader, then we'll support that measure. But this is not it.
So unpack that for me, because first of all, are you saying that essentially if the government doesn't reduce taxes or cut taxes, which would add to inflationary pressures, your government won't support, or your party rather won't support these supports for low-income Canadians?
Look, this is going to drive inflation further. We've seen the government continue
but people
to spend,
need help.
Continue to spend, and people can get help. The minister who is standing in front of a luxury resort said that inflation went down. It went down because of gas prices. The government is actually going to triple the carbon tax. There are people who cannot afford to fill their cars. They can't afford new work boots. They can't afford nutritious food to feed their families, and their kids cannot afford to live in the neighborhood that they grew up, even buy a place. This measure of $500 a year, which again is $42 a month, doesn't even pay for a couple days of rent where I'm from. So this isn't.
That's not it, right? There's dental care in there. There's a GST rebate. Like there are a number of low-income. Just let me finish. There are low-income Canadians who are really hurting right now. And is your party really prepared to tell them you shouldn't get extra support because it might drive up inflation more, and then the government should cut taxes because that also will drive up inflation?
Our leader has been talking about this for 2.5 years, and 2 days after he's elected, they finally turn their attention to affordability measures for Canadians. These are not the right ones. This is going to continue to drive up inflation, the inflationary deficit, and the inflationary taxes on Canadians is exactly the wrong approach.
Okay, we'll revisit that in a second. I want to bring in Mr. Blakey into the conversation because a lot of what the government is promising now is stuff that your party had proposed or even put into its deal with it. But like your colleague just pointed out, what the government announced today is also like $42 a month to help with rent. Why hasn't your party pushed the government to go further if in fact those supports are so necessary as your party has characterized them in the past?
Well, what I'd say is this, is first of all, it took a lot of pushing to get them to act on the Canada Housing Benefit. It took a lot of pushing for them to reverse position where just 18 months ago, they were voting with the Conservatives against dental care. And not that long ago, just in the spring session, they were voting with the Conservatives against GST rebate. So we have been pushing, and this is the result of that pushing and making the government do something finally that's going to help support people. So we're happy to talk about what more we can do. And New Democrats have a lot of ideas about what an NDP government would do differently from a Liberal government. But these are the things that we've been able to force them to do in the context of the Parliament that Canadians elected just a year ago. But the GST rebate is going to reach a lot of people, and it's the right kind of measure because these are folks that are not able to drive inflation. They're just trying to buy the same things that they were buying 6 months ago that they no longer can afford because the price of those things has gone up. So this helps them meet those price increases and buy the things that they needed to buy for their family and were able to 6 or 12 months ago. So this is not an inflation driving increase at all.
Right,
and in fact, a tax cut would apply to a much broader base of people, including people with a lot higher incomes who could then take that as disposable income to have more money chasing fewer goods, depending on.
But on the question of whether this actually helps people as much as it should, when you refer to the parliamentary context within which this is as far as you could push the Liberals to go, that context was created by your party by agreeing to prop them up for another 3 years.
Well, the parliamentary context was created by Canadians electing a minority government, and we've been trying to use the leverage that we have with our 25 seats to maximize the government doing things that are actually going to help people, which we know when Liberals are left to their own devices, that takes a really long time if it comes at all. And we've been able to not only establish them moving forward on some important measures like those that were announced today, but to also push their timelines up. So I think this is an example of a party with a mandate to fight for people, getting things done in a minority parliament. We're going to continue to push for those things.
Respectfully, Mr. Blakey, and pardon me the interruption, but you didn't really force them to do it faster because you tried in May and they just said no. And now all of a sudden, as I asked the minister many times, they've changed course. I understand that you're saying that you're trying to leverage your position, but you've essentially created a situation in which the Liberals think that they have almost carte blanche to take as long as they want because they can count on your support.
When we had that vote, that wasn't the end of the advocacy. We didn't throw up our hands. So we continue to apply pressure everywhere we can. And there will be times when that happens relatively more quickly. And when we have certain defeats, like the vote last time, when the Liberals refused to vote with us and to move ahead on that, we will continue to apply pressure to the government in every way we can to get things done for people. That's what we were elected to do. It's what we're going to continue to do. And there will be times where we don't get what we want. I would say, in respect of these affordability issues, particularly when it comes to housing, there are things that need to happen. Like, this wasn't a crisis that was created overnight. It's been 20 years or more in the making. There are things that we need the government to do in order to be able to address the long-term issues in the housing market, which are not on a trajectory to really get much better. Prices will come down a little bit with higher interest rates, but they're coming down from extraordinary highs. They're not going to get to where they're actually affordable for people unless we're seeing major investment in social housing, unless the government creates an acquisition fund for nonprofits to acquire many affordable units that are coming on the market because the federal government is letting the grants that they used to supply so that these places could provide affordable rents. They're letting those expire, and real estate investment trusts are buying them up. Those are the kinds of long-term policy actions we continue to not be able to get the Liberals to move on, that we're fighting for. And it's the difference between what an NDP government would be doing and what the Liberal government is doing under pressure from our party.
Okay, I just have a few seconds left, Ms. Lance. One last question to you. I just want to make sure you explain to Canadians, why it's necessary to predicate support of these measures, which I do hear from a lot of Canadians, like they need some extra help right now. Why your party would not consider supporting them based on the possibility of a tax cut. I understand the point of view that Canadians don't want to see extra taxes, but a tax cut would add more spending power, would continue to drive up inflation. Why not support this, help Canadians now, and then push the government on the issues you're speaking of?
Every dollar that is spent on this is going to drive inflation up. That means every dollar that is used for this is going to evaporate by increased inflation. And the only thing that is going to put a stop to this is to eliminate the inflationary deficits and commit to no new tax increases. We know they're coming. We know that a payroll tax is coming. We know that the carbon tax will be tripled. And that's what Canadians have told us, and that's exactly what we're going to stand up for in the House of Commons.
But again, I understand the point around no new taxes. I do understand that, but this is going to help low-income Canadians. It's not a massive amount of money compared to other spending. I'm not even saying that spending isn't inflationary and that there is a valid criticism there. But at this moment in time, when you know and your party is talking about how much Canadians are hurting, is this the time to say we're not going to support stuff that might help?
This is the time to actually attack inflation. And again, every dollar spent is going to be evaporated. Every one of those $42 a month that somebody in Toronto gets to pay 4 days or 3 days of rent is going to be erased by the continued spending. These guys have to stop the inflationary deficits, and they have to commit to no new taxes. That's what's going to stop inflation.
Okay, I'm out of time, unfortunately. I'm sorry, Mr. Blakey. I've gone way too long.
I'd love to jump in and talk about the role that corporate greed is playing in driving inflation as well, because it's not usually part of the conversation.
We have talked about it with you before on this program. I promise to talk about it again. I appreciate I appreciate both of you making the time for this tonight. Thanks for the discussion, Melissa Lanceman and Daniel Blakey. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.